Careful what you say or you'll get infected.
All right. Hello, doctor.
Doctor.
Ah.
All
right. That should set the tone for the rest of the night. Right there. Oh, my goodness. Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. We got Melissa and Tim Vickers is in the house, too, twice.
Oh, how about that?
Gregory, Robert. I know we got a few other people in there tonight. We are talking about the God helmet tonight. Oh my goodness. Or the Koren helmet? Koren
helmet, God helmet.
Yeah. So basically, I'll just give you a rundown, a quick Cliff Notes version. It is named after its inventor, Stanley Koren, and it was developed by him and neuroscientist Michael Persinger, or Persinger, depending on your pronunciation. And it looks like, I mean, I was trying to figure out where it came about because going through different studies, he didn't use the helmet all the time. I found at least one that had just a almost like containers, and it reminded me of Princess Leia. It really did. The way they described it, like containers on either side, and it was attached by Velcro straps. And I was like, oh, okay, that's odd. That was in 97. But I did find an earlier reference to an actual helmet, and it's described in several of his papers as a motorcycle helmet, a medium-sized motorcycle helmet, which I go back and forth. I see people saying it was like a snowmobile helmet, and I guess it doesn't really matter. It's the same shit.
Right.
But basically, it was a motorcycle helmet that had 8 solenoids, 4 on either side, and you put it on, and it directed a very low power frequency at your amygdala. Oh my god, I'm gonna fuck it up.
Yeah,
amygdala
and hippocampus,
and the temporal lobes. I think that was it. Yeah,
temporal lobes. Yeah,
yep.
To see if they could. I mean, it's weird. Like, we know it, and it's. I guess it's got this reputation of inducing religious type experiences and or ghost experiences and other feelings like that. But the more I looked into it, and we're probably going to get into this tonight, it was not originally for that. I found a couple of his papers having to do with epilepsy, and then creativity, and other sensations like that, and exploring. And it looked like it just developed. However, I did find very early on a lot of paranormal references, like overtones throughout the entire thing. So we can get into that too. So let's go with our opening statements, and we'll go with Dave.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
So it's funny we're talking about this because what is it, tomorrow with the new season of Evil coming out, we're rewatching season 2 of Evil, episode 8, called B is for Brain on Paramount Plus. They specifically have a show about the God helmet. They obviously go way off course and take a lot of liberties with it, but it was kind of funny. We're like, oh shit, look at that. How timely. So yeah, this is something I've actually read about and tried to keep up on for a very long time. And I don't know what year it was, but I ended up getting the commercial version of this, which is basically just a bunch of electromagnetic coils with Velcro that you put on your head plug it into your computer. And one of the people, I don't know if it was somebody, I can't remember for sure if he worked in the lab or he's very familiar with the research, but he replicated the signals through sound files. And as you crank it through the sound card, it replicates with the coils, the magnetic coils, the same type of chirp and burst magnetic fields that Persinger was using. So that was quite a while ago. It was well before 2010. So I played around with it, looked at it, tried it, had a couple other people back in the day in our old paranormal ghost hunting group try it. And it's an interesting concept. Just my general thoughts. You mentioned a little bit about temporal lobe epilepsy and some of the things that came on, and there it is. That's the one I have.
Yay!
All $700 of it.
What?
Well, I think you're paying for the software they developed. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about it. You hear people say it hasn't been replicated. Persinger didn't use any controls. Well, not true. There's at least one replication. He did use controls, but there's others that showed no effect. And then there's, you look at some of the articles that are floating around on the internet that what they call potential replications, like creating the haunted room. I think it was Chris French that may have done that. They're not really replications. If you look at some of the studies people say are failed replications, they're not truly replications. It's a whole different concept. So to me, it's interesting. It's not an invasive electrical stimulation. A lot of this, the literature he looked at, and people have replicated it with transcranial magnetic stimulation, or they actually, when they had the brain open up and they would use pens or electrodes to apply magnetic fields to certain parts of the brain, and they saw people had similar experiences. So the controversy here really is with those very low level complex fields basically applied to your skull. How can they influence brain activity? How's that happening? Or is it simply due to suggestion? It could be, but again, Persinger never said that there couldn't be other factors like belief, prior experience. He said these are all things that factor into it. But when you look at the data, the sham or placebo controls, 20 to 30% of the people had an experience, but when they flipped the switch and turned the thing on, 80% of the people had experiences. So he definitely doesn't shy away from it. And I really think part of it, at least my take, is that it turned into a bit of a pissing match between researchers, and it also showed that there was flaws in what everybody did, and nobody really knows exactly what's going on here. But there is a new article I'll talk about that shows that very low level, like equal to changes in the Earth's magnetic field, can cause actual changes in your brain. They see more alpha activity. That's a recent article. So with that more recent data, it shows that this actually could be possible, and your brain's just trying to figure out what to do with those signals. So all kinds of, it's a complicated subject. As you guys know, we were kind of going back and forth on all the different articles, and there's a lot of shit to talk about. There's a lot of stuff to unwrap. It's not simple at all, but to me, it's fascinating. So I look forward to it.
All right. Tim, what do you got?
Yeah, what Dave said.
Bitch.
So, yeah, to me, the concept's a pretty simple concept, and that's stuff outside of your own brain activity. There's certain stimuli that can mess with your brain, and your brain has to figure out what's going on. I don't think that that's a question that's not, something that we don't already know happens, that our brain just makes sense of stimulation, that wherever it comes from, smell, sight, sound, feel, sensation. I guess looking at that, I certainly enjoyed reading the articles on it. I really did. It was very interesting. But my mind, going where my mind does, is I started looking at the sensory deprivation and the reports of feeling people being in the room with you, having, even at some point, somebody was talking. I watched one of the experiments where they were hearing auditory words, and Dr. Persinger was actually in that video and explaining that like they knew, like they were putting in words in they were affecting that type of result by the way that they were manipulating the magnetic fields around the brain, and was very clear that they didn't have anything going into any sound that had anything to do with language or speech, but the experiencers were definitely reporting that they heard language. So not only could they manipulate it, but they could also know what they were manipulating. So when they wanted someone to hear something that sounded like voices, they could do it, which I think is really cool. And it's beyond my pay grade. No matter how nice a white coat I have, I still won't be able to understand fully all that concept. However, I did take a certain sidetrack with what ghost hunters do. I don't know. The more I read, the more I kept thinking about the situation where you're in a sensory deprivation type of environment. Fatigue, time of day was a big thing that had to do with the when they did the test. And I started noticing just some correlations, and it doesn't mean anything because there's a correlation, but it's just something that I thought was very interesting. That when you think about ghost hunting, you think about it being in the middle of the night with very little sound, very little communication with other ghost hunters, lots of dim light. You're in the dark and you sit and you're fatigued, you're tired, you're probably hungry, and then you begin to have experiences. I don't think it's necessarily a magnetic field thing, as is a sensory deprivation thing. And found a couple articles that talked about how other sensations or other senses in your brain and other parts in your brain will begin to say, hey, shit's pretty quiet around here. We're going to make things happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. So I enjoyed it. It opened up, I don't know, I probably ended up on 12 different topics just on this one topic. And I blame Kenny. I kept sending research articles and to them to look at, and it was like, this has nothing to do with the damn topic. I'm like, yeah, but check this shit out. It's really cool. And they were like, let's stay on topic. So it was fun.
Yeah, I had fun researching this, but there, like you said, I mean, I usually do my research on Saturdays. I get up, I start doing it, and this was overwhelming because there was so much. And I literally printed out like 6 different studies, and there was just the ones that I could access and print out. There were a bunch of others, and I'm kind of in the same boat, I think, as you, Tim. I don't know if it's, I guess, reading through some of the studies and the methodologies, I had issues with separating people. And I think this was brought up. I think we brought this up. Maybe Dave, I think you brought it up in our chat about there was one that only had like a sham study. It was a sham helmet, but I'm also seeing like a lot of the Persinger stuff, or Persinger. Is it Persinger or Persinger?
I've heard it both ways.
Okay. I'm going to say Persinger because that's what I'm used to. But I've seen a lot of his studies, and it just seems like everyone gets the same thing. There is no control group. I haven't seen any control. And maybe there is because I haven't, full disclosure, I haven't been able to access all the paper seeds on, so I don't know. But the ones that I have read, everyone gets the same sequence. And it depends. I think like sometimes the sequence was 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. There were 20-minute sessions. There were 30-minute sessions, depending on what test there was. I would have liked more to see, all right, let's just put somebody in there and do that sequence, do your full test, but then also have people in there that didn't have anything at all.
They did do that.
Okay.
And they did 2 different types of placebo sham experiments within Persinger's group.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't get to that.
Yeah. Yep. That's in there. Yeah. I mean, you got to dig for this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of papers. There's a shit ton of information. Right. And let's be honest, what he writes is not easy to read. None of his stuff is easy to read. It's very complicated. So that kind of stuff is kind of easy to read. And I think some of the criticisms of his work that came out, people said he didn't use a control or a sham, which that was just outright false. So that he did use them, but we'll talk about that as we get into it.
Some of the things that I was reading about, and especially because I did come across an article by a reporter, Jack Hitt, who I've actually met. I was surprised when I came across his work. He was the one he's a reporter that came to my house and accompanied me in a group to a psychic Sting.
Oh, okay.
So when I saw his name, I was like, oh, whoa, I know this guy. That's pretty cool. But he was able to actually go up to Persinger's lab and go through the whole test. And his description of some of the things, and again, take into account, I think there were several hundred people that had already gone through this. But his descriptions were like the chair that he had to sit in looked it was probably something because of all the gel that they use to attach the electrodes to your heads. It was all over the chair, and the chair had seen much better days. So the impression I got is it was probably looked like it was in a porn movie, like a really bad one, just the way he described it. That it was very uncomfortable. And again, going into the sensory deprivation issues. I mean, some of this stuff, a lot of the stuff that I see listed by participants, I experience when I go to bed. You know, like a lot of this stuff. I mean, I'm not seeing full blown apparitions, but yeah, I see shadows move. But I also had the tingling. I have like the flash of light. I mean, I see that almost every night. Going to bed, it's dark, and I see flashes of light. Maybe that's just, you know, I'm going crazy. Visual effects, you know, I can stare at the ceiling, and I see all kinds of designs and shit going around. So all of this stuff I can see if you're in a chamber, whether it's completely dark or you have the red light going, the photography light that's going with the ping pong balls. Because I thought it was actually goggles that they were using. But then the more I read in these papers from him, he says it was two halves of a golf ball or a ping pong ball that were stuffed with cotton and made into goggles from that. So
you could have spent the extra couple bucks and got some good goggles.
You know, hey,
I think they did two things. They tried to get the old Gansfield type situation where you had the red light with the ping pong balls and the cotton, but there were studies that were done with complete blindfolding, so they couldn't see anything. So it was pitch black. So I think they did both. That's the problem with this. There's so many studies and so many repetitions of stuff in those studies of what they did before, what they did now, what they did or they're going to do in the future. It takes a lot of time to dig through that crap.
I agree. I mean, this is not something that you can do on a Saturday Saturday morning and be ready in time for an 8 o'clock show. But yeah, there were I still have issues with some of the stuff. The sensory deprivation. I don't know. I mean, this isn't my area, so I really don't know. I just seeing this and I'm like, you know what? Like I said, I experience a lot of this stuff anyway without the use of full-blown sensory deprivation or these signals being pumped into my head. I would love to try it. I mean,
yes.
I can't imagine what would happen if I did. I mean, I'd love to try to experience it.
We can arrange that. I got one.
Awesome.
I mentioned to you guys, like when way early into my paranormal life, I went to my first Paracon, which was in Virginia, and my group went because Taps was showing up. It was very early in Taps' life. So we went to go, I know, what are we going to do? I also believed in orbs. So there's that. So when we were there, they actually had what I guess probably would be a God helmet. That's what they were talking about. And we're asking people to try it. So I tried it. But after reading this and chatting with Dave a little bit, it was, you know, they put me in a photo booth looking thing, kind of it certainly wasn't soundproof. I don't remember being blindfolded, although I might have. But yeah, they put me in a booth and I was there probably 15 or 20 minutes and they said, "Did you experience anything?" And I was like, "No." But looking at this, it was a very serious sensory deprivation thing and blindfolded. And I think some of those people went longer than an hour inside the room, which makes more sense to me.
Yeah, the sensory deprivation is actually pretty common in a lot of parapsychological research. So if you're trying to pick up very low level signals or something that's internally generated in your brain, you want sensory deprivation.
Mhm.
You're gonna. That's the problem. Is like Kenny said, you're gonna get some of these things that they reported just in plain old sensory deprivation. So the important thing to keep in mind is comparing the sensory deprivation without the actual helmet on and the electromagnetic fields off and not introducing that to it compared to the people who had the same conditions but had them on. So you have to look at the percentages of differences there. That's where it becomes a little more interesting.
Sure, I agree with that.
Right. And I think when we get into I mean, I'm just jumping all around here, but the signals that are generated, it looks like it was different from each side of your head. On one side, I think I'm not going to guess. One side was 1 microtesla, and the other side was 5 microtesla. And as I believe I read, it was like there was almost like 3 sessions where they turned on one side and just left that on, did a cycle with that side, did a cycle with the other side, and then they did a cycle with both on. I think that's what I was reading through. I've read so many papers today, and I still don't understand half the shit. But
this is years and years and years of research.
Right. I mean, the earliest.
And they learned as they went, like you said, they started maybe with the right side, the right temporal lobe stimulation. Okay, that was good. But then they tried a couple other things, and then they found out this kind of sweet spot of what type of signals you should do, where you blast the right side with a blip, and then you do both sides with this. I don't remember what they called it. They had a chirp and then like a burst that would go to both sides.
Right.
And they found that that's the best. And we can talk about why they did that. There's a reason they did do that.
It was the burst and the Thomas pattern, I believe.
Yep.
Thomas
Yeah,
pattern.
the chip or burst or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the thing that's even more confusing. They use different names for the different patterns, but it's all the same pattern. So it's like, oh, Jesus.
What I couldn't
pattern are you
figure
talking
out,
about?
because I know it's referred to as complex pattern, and I didn't I know what that word means, but they didn't explain what they meant by complex.
So what they talk about is the complexity is more important than the strength because they kept the low level stuff. It's the shape of the waveform, the frequency, and the length of time that they administer it, and then the length of time between when they have it basically sending a signal or not. So there's signal, blank, signal. So it's very complex. Yeah. And I think what they were talking about is 1 to 3 milliseconds between anywhere from 10 to 100 milligauss or 50 milligauss. And then the burst was once every 4 seconds. And importantly, they wanted to have it go for at least 20 minutes. And then they talk about the frequency modulation loops. So what they were trying to do is the background, at least as far as I can tell, is they looked at EEGs from people who had experiences that would be similar to what they were trying to replicate in the lab. So what they did is take that and then design a program to administer similar complex magnetic fields that were like those EEGs that they recorded in people having experiences.
Okay. So one of the things that stood out to me was that the power, like I mentioned, is the one side was 1 micro Tesla, the other side was 5 microtesla, which translates into 0.05 Gauss. That's 5 microtesla. Translate. I used a calculator. I didn't try to figure it out myself. I used a
50 milligauss.
So
50 milligauss
would
be 50 milligauss.
Yeah, 50 milligauss.
So our numbers match. That's a good start tonight.
Yeah. All right. And 1 microtesla equals 0.01 Gauss, which is 10 milligauss. And one of the things that I went off on, just like Tim, I go off on the tangents. I was like, I wonder how much, what do we get from the Earth? Like, how much do we get from the Earth? And what I found was that we get, depending on elevation, it's between 0.25 and 0.65 Gauss, which is higher than what we're getting from that helmet. So I guess what and I don't know if we can get into this or have an answer for this, but I don't understand why we are accustomed to a higher level, but then when you put this weaker level on it, it has an effect on us.
Two things. They did the experiments in a Faraday cage, and two, these are complex varying fields as opposed to the steady certain hertz Earth's magnetic field that's coming out. That would be my
Okay.
thought of what the difference is.
Okay. I can run with that for now. Look at this. We're getting along. I thought we'd be fighting by now, Dave.
It is what it is. I mean, it is what it is. It's the parameters. And
so I know they said they were, well, actually, I mean, some of this stuff, I don't remember reading about a Faraday cage. I know in some they did, but what I was reading is that it was an acoustic chamber, not a Faraday cage.
yeah, I think a lot of their papers do mention that chamber was also set up to block magnetic fields.
So it says that after completion of consent form, the subject sat within a comfortable armchair within a commercial acoustic chamber. He was blindfolded with a pair of modified swimmer's goggles.
What was this? I mean, yeah. When was that study, and what was the year? I think they did some. I know they did some with the Faraday cage as well.
This is from. Hold on. This is 2000.
Okay.
And then the sensors were attached. Modified motorcycle helmet described in previous studies was placed on the head. The helmet contained 4 solenoids.
Okay.
And that's it. There's no other mention of anything else.
You almost, which is a lot of freaking work, but you almost need to map out the year and then what the methodology was, because it progressed over and changed depending.
That's what I found that too.
Right.
It seemed like, going back to what you said, there was specifically 2, and I don't have it in my notes, but there were specifically 2, for lack of a better word, laboratories that were fighting back and forth with him. Yeah. And that was, they weren't able to replicate. And I think, to his credit, going through each time he did it, he modified what their criticisms were. Mm-hmm. And while I thought that was really good, that the later ones I read, that he was doing things that they were criticizing the test for. I think the early paper, the first one, I think the one that I read and the one that was critiqued in the video, I think.
Yeah, that was an early one. Yeah,
that was the early one. That was the one that had no mention of what they did or how they measured things or any mechanism other than going back to my original concept. It was just basically putting some magnets on your brain and varying the pulses and seeing what they come up with.
The 3 that I have here from 93, 97, and 2000. And then I had others, and these didn't. But I do agree with you. I did read one that I didn't print that mentioned a Faraday cage, but these 3 didn't. It just says, it's almost like, I almost want to say they copied and pasted because it reads almost exactly the same.
I'm sure there's a lot of copying and pasting going on when you publish as many friggin' papers as that guy did.
So if that was the case, at least with these experiments, then it wasn't shielded.
But I mean, and that's a fair point. If it's not stated in the paper, you don't know,
right?
Unless you were there. So it could have been, it could not have been. I mean, there are ones that specifically say it was a Faraday cage. The whole point, though, is you're trying to keep the control or sham group and the active group the same. So the only thing you're varying is the field on or is the field off.
Right.
And that's where you got to look at the differences. So technically, unless the Earth's magnetic field is, going wacky at a certain time in the control group or in the active group versus that, you may or may not, it may not make a big difference.
That tickled something in my brain too. When they cycled it, I know you tickle my brain.
The only thing that's getting tickled.
Well,
there's still lots of alcohol left, so we'll see.
Yeah. So I was thinking about and reading the 5-minute on, 5-minute off cycle that I was reading about, and I don't know much about this, so the question came up in my head of what if there's residual? What if this is not something that dissipates within 5 minutes, you know, or even a couple seconds, because the off might not be off. It might not matter. As soon as you are exposed to something, it might have that long-lasting effect for a few minutes or a few seconds. So you could be at the end of that 5 minutes, and for the time for the time that is necessary for your brain or your parts of your brain to purge that intrusion might be just when it picks back up again. So you're going to have almost a continuous flow there. So that's just speculating. Again, I don't know.
That's a good question, and I really don't know. All I remember is about 10 or 15 minutes, they started having people report when they did this whatever repetition of the cycle of signals on, off, and then about 20 minutes is when it seemed to start to peak. But that's a good question. I really don't know. But I swear I read somewhere, and I can't remember what paper it was, but some people reported still having experiences after the experiment was done and they left the facility. So maybe that would speak to your residual potential impact. So it's possible. That's a really good question.
Actually, to bring it up, Susan Blackmore, she did an interview where
saw that interview.
Yeah, she talked about it, and I was honestly surprised. I don't know how old that video is. But I saw her. I was like, I've met Susan. Didn't look like that. Anyway, but she, I'm not being mean. It was just not what I expected. But her description was almost like she had this profound experience, and that she should not have been allowed to leave, because she describes going up to, I guess, one of the assistants and saying, you know, how long do I have to stay here before I can drive home? And they're like, nobody stays. You just go home.
Yeah, and they said, you're a skeptic. Get the fuck out. Just don't believe anything you experience when you drive home. You'll be fine.
I believe she did not start out as a skeptic.
She did not. She started out as a hardcore parapsychologist.
Yes. So I don't know when this interview was. It was in 4:3 aspect ratio. So I mean, I'm guessing it's a while ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just.
I'm kidding.
I know. Fuck you, Dave. Her description, though, was it was interesting because she's claiming she should not have driven home because, I mean, she was basically under the influence of something, you know, and it was still residual there, which was direct opposite of when Richard Dawkins went in and did it. And his experience was, all he experienced was some tingling in his legs, but other than that, nothing happened to him.
Yeah, he said it was comfortable.
Though. Not unexpected, because even the people who had the field on, only 80% had an experience. 20% didn't.
Right.
Not everybody is. And he lists there's certain factors in people who they would expect to have either more experiences or more profound experiences based on these couple different factors.
Did you see in one of the papers that had reported that, or maybe it was the video I watched with the lady today, people who are in hard sciences or do science classes in university or school, in high school, regular school, tend to have the ability to separate what they're doing with what they're believing. And that was an interesting thing, because one of my questions about the whole thing was, everybody could be having the same experience, but at some point somebody could say, I'm having this experience, but it's because I'm wearing magnets and it's really nothing, as opposed to somebody having an experience and saying, holy shit, this is just like what I felt when I thought my grandmother visited me after she died, or when I had this vision in my dream that came true. And this is just like the same experience or something very similar. So it was a lot to me about the belief of the person that was having the experience and how they personalized that experience and could convey it either orally or written, how it was.
And so it wasn't that they had an experience or they didn't. And those who did, the belief affected how they interpreted it and where it came from. Because there was one part where they talk about they had atheists go through and do this. And they did have a supposed sense of presence and an out-of-body of experience, but they interpreted it as coming from their own minds and didn't put any metaphysical or mystical label to it or causation to it.
Right. That's exactly That's exactly the way it was. Yeah. So
that touches. I'm putting Jim's up, Dr. Jim, his comment here, because that goes into this. It's. I don't think you can actually. It didn't show that subjects sensed a godlike presence. It showed people experienced a presence. So the godlike part is more of a personal interpretation, and I think that's what you were touching on, Dave. Right?
Yep. Yeah, some of them. I mean, if it was they believed in Allah, they said it was Allah. If they believed in just a religious figure, they said it was a religious figure.
Right.
And the same thing with Susan and Dawkins was the tingling sensation. You know, her in that video, she said it felt like she felt a tingling in one of her legs, and it felt like her leg was stretched out and across the room and up the side of a wall.
Interesting.
Maybe if we watch
cool.
the same, yeah.
But
she said,
careful
she
what
said
stretches there.
Yeah, she said it soon ended and recessed and then came back to its normal size. But the two had the same report of a tingling sensation. So you have one that's very science-based method. Dude, you are so red, Kenny. One has like a very science-based reporting personality, and the other one was a more metaphysical report. Yep. And so I guess my question was, could physically and mentally and maybe actual physiology be experiencing the same thing, but like you said, the beliefs and how they are able to report it based on those beliefs are two completely different things.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what we didn't really pull into this yet, and what I didn't read so far, is how people, when they interpret it, are they equating it to like when somebody prays, when they sit down and pray and they get that overwhelming feeling. I know that some people, when they get into that, they get so far, I don't know how to say it properly, but they have like a religious fever almost, where they pray so much they get into this almost bliss kind of feeling. The same way some people get it from meditation, and other people, like, I mean, I feel euphoric when I'm just out having a good time and, you know, with my friends, and just, you know, everything's going good and you're just having a great time. Maybe it's if somebody experiences this God helmet, they go underneath and they have this experience of a presence. Maybe that's what they're equating it to. I mean, this is speculation, because at the bottom line is we can't know what they are experiencing. They can describe it and we can try to interpret, but we're never going to actually know exactly how they felt. So that's
or weird. Exactly what they experienced.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess that little bit to help, when they sent the signal to the left side of the brain, it was unpleasant, and people interpreted it as a ghost, demon, devil, or evil. And then when they stimulated the right side of the brain, it was either positive or neutral. They would experience like a dead loved one, angels, or God. So they talk about a sense of presence. Some people talked about and said that they sensed there was a angelic presence, there was a good presence, there was God. So again, though, I think it depends on what their beliefs were and how they were interpreting that.
Right. Because I didn't.
And whatever that means, what do you think the sense? How do you describe sensing God? I would have no idea what they're talking about, because I've never had that experience.
Right. I have nothing to compare to.
And that's important. It's important to, I think, at least note that some people don't have the language to express what they're experiencing, so they do the best they can with what they have, and maybe make a lesser analogy other than something that they may have.
I also didn't come across any descriptions, like visual descriptions of like maybe seeing or imagining wings or facial features or anything like that. It was more so, I mean, it was bare bones basic, like feel a presence, interpret it to the first thing that you would latch onto, the first thing that you're familiar with. And yeah, it goes back to belief and those filters. So, I mean, it would have been interesting if we had some people like, oh, you know what? I felt a presence and it felt like it was large or, you know, bulky and it moved around the room and, you know, it just felt evil. Like I didn't see any of that. Like it felt evil. I mean, I guess you might be able to interpret like demon as evil, but
Yeah,
I didn't read anything like that.
I thought some of the papers have some descriptions, but there's a book by Todd Murphy called The God Helmet Experiments. The science that found God in the human brain. And he basically takes the papers, the academic papers, and puts them in terms and language that people can understand. And he does talk about some of the experiences people had, specifically describing what they experienced. But it's all over the place.
So I let me kind of interject this if it's not too late or too early either way. But and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong because I only have a small blurb on this. But the intention, well, you probably might. So the intention of the God helmet he didn't call it the God helmet. The intention is, from what I saw, was he had a hypothesis about the brain sense of self. And that's all he was wanting to study, was how the brain senses itself. Hence wanting to look at the differences. Why, if somebody's asking why would they do different magnitudes, I guess for lack of a better word, per hemisphere, he was after the differences of how they perceived it. So I'm going to say this, and I told Kenny I'm going to mess it up. I've already had half a thing of alcohol. So
Here we go.
at least the God helmet was not specifically designed to elicit visions of God, but to test several of Persinger's hypotheses about brain functioning. The first of these is the victorial hemisphericity hypothesis. Shut up, Kenny. You'll get me started. Which
Crawled your way through that.
I did, like naked through broken glass. Very gingerly, I went through that. Which proposes that the human the human sense of self has two components, one on each side of the brain,
Yes.
that ordinarily work together, but in which the left hemisphere is usually dominant. So I probably should have opened with that, but it's important, I think, to say, like, he wasn't trying to capture God. I don't think, at least in his initial report, he just wanted to see how the brain recognized the sense of self, which is, I think, a very interesting area of study.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like consciousness, I guess, being aware of yourself and aware of your own brain. Yeah, five more drinks, Tim. I'm out. If I have
You're absolutely right. That's what he was trying to do. And then, you know, that what you said is where he came up with that interhemispheric intrusion idea, where your left side of your brain basically maintains your self. And then the right side, because you're doing this manipulation and you're causing metabolic activity in one side to be higher or lower, that the right side intrudes on the left side, which it doesn't normally do. And you experience that as something foreign or external, or could be God or a ghost or an entity of something. So you're absolutely spot on, Tim, with what he was trying to do. He was not trying to find the God spot or induce God experiences in the brain. He was trying to understand how the brain works and what's going on there. So Persinger did not go looking for the G spot, and he did. Maybe he found it. Who knows?
Wow.
God spot.
So
God spot, Kenny. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Kenny.
Everyone with hate mail, please direct it to Dave Schumacher this week for interpreting the G
And it's going to be automatically forwarded to Kenny Biddle.
Well, okay. So then, Tim, I think you mentioned that Michael Shermer tried it too, and he have experience where?
Yes, and I tried to look that back up for that. Yes, but he had an experience, I think, where he said that he just experienced what he thought was him walking by himself. If I get that correct, so he did have an experience. And I'm going to look that up while we're talking about it. But yeah, so he did.
Okay. I'll let you go into that later. But I thought that was interesting. That was like, because we have like Susan Blackmore that had a great, like an intense experience, and then Richard Dawkins had no experience, and then Shermer was kind of like he had a cool experience that was not necessarily in the middle. It was probably more on Susan's side, but it was really interesting, and that I wanted to get into that or touch on that. The time of day also stuck out to me with testing people at different times of day, because it was in the morning, and then I believe it's like some of them were like 10 a.m. in the morning or maybe earlier, and then the others were after 5 p.m. So I thought that might have something to do with some of these experiences, because depending on if you're a morning person or not, if you're awake, if you're not awake, if you're tired. And again, like I think Tim touched on it with ghost hunters, like when they're going on their ghost hunt and it's like 2 a.m. and they're not used to being up at 2 a.m. and they're in the dark and stuff, they're going to have sleep deprivation. They're going to be tired. They're going to be like, all right, prone to hallucination, maybe slipping into this. But I was wondering, like, I noticed that, and I wasn't sure about it because I read about different times and the time of day having an effect on the participants. And it just made me think, like, oh, that's right. If you get me up early, like, if I'm up and out at 7 a.m., especially on a Saturday, nope. I'm going to go right to sleep. You put me in a dark room that's quiet with ping pong balls on my face, I'm out. I'm out cold.
Yeah.
And even so, like at the end of the day, I mean, usually that's my active time. Like the later it is, the more active I am. So I would have liked to seen, and I didn't see this, I don't know if there is, but I would have liked to seen like a breakdown of, for lack of a better term, morning people versus night people, and see if that had any impact on their experiences.
And I think they talk about the time of day and why you would want to do it morning and afternoon and not just afternoon. And that was brought up in that, was it Christine Simmons Moore, Rice, Gowen and Hopkins paper?
Yes.
They talk about that, and I'd have to look it up. I don't remember exactly, but I thought it had to do with something about later in the afternoon, you might be more likely to be capable of having these micro sleep episodes and hypnagogic episodes. So they were arguing that might have been what led to some of his results in the original study, is because they did them later in the day.
Okay.
But I got to look that. I don't remember exactly. It's a real bitch when you highlight a whole bunch of stuff on your iPad on a PDF and then it doesn't save your highlighting. It's like, motherfucker. Spent like an hour reading that article and then nothing. But yeah, I think it had something to do. They did address it in that article.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm old school. I got all the paper and everything's highlighted on here. I don't trust anything else. My luck, everything will shut down and I'll be screwed. So there was, I think this one, exceptional experiences, the study that you just mentioned, that turned out to be more, I think their conclusions were more that it was, what do I want to say? That it wasn't due to the helmet itself, because the whole study is based on a sham helmet.
Yep.
So they had people going through with the sham helmet, which was not hooked up to anything. It looked like it was. And they were clever. They took like the suction cups from, I think, old style phones, and they put them on the helmet to make it look like they had solenoids. And then they all wired into USB, which plugged into a computer and lit up, which looked like it was on. But I think they attributed most of the experiences to the participants' anticipation. I think that's what it was. This was a long one. This was a long study, so I was trying to read through, but there was too much. I didn't. I know. Go ahead.
Skip to conclusion.
No, I was going to say, if you read towards the end, or read the middle, and it says there's 7 hypotheses that they wanted to test. I'm not going to list them all because it's going to take too long. But if you go through their findings and the conclusion, you got to note that many times they say things as, and I quote, after hypothesis 1, after controlling for study order, there was a significant main effect for paranormal belief. But then they go on, hypothesis 2, after controlling for order effects, there was no main effect for the study. The null hypothesis is therefore accepted. Hypothesis 3, after controlling for study 3, there was no significant interaction. They go on and on. Hypothesis 4 is partially supported. Hypothesis 5, 6, and 7 are not supported for alterations in consciousness. Hypothesis 6 is therefore partially supported. So this paper did not definitively prove shit. You got to read, you got to, and I'm sorry, and I know, we all use Wikipedia, and I'm a fan of it in some instances, but they point out this is proving against Persinger's thing, but they fail to point out those nuances, which are very important, that they did not find all the hypotheses that they came up with. There was not full support for any of this. So there's no way in fucking hell this is a definitive rebuttal of Persinger's work. It's just not. To me, that's misleading. It's completely misleading. Because if you read it, the authors themselves say that most of the hypotheses either were not supported or were only partially supported, which means there needs to be more work. The other problem I had with it, well, I wasn't a problem, but leading into it, the percentages they found in using a sham or a fake helmet, similar to what Persinger reported in his placebo and sham thing. So he's like, well, duh, I already reported that. That's true. And a lot of the points they made here, they said, yeah, they do play a role in this. We know they do. Mm-hmm. So my big problem gets back to, if you're going to try to do a replication, you're going to look at this. Why did you not have a positive control where you actually had both the skeptics and the believers, no field in these conditions, and why not turn the field on and see what happens? Because that's where the real difference is. So I have kind of some problems with that paper.
Really?
Really? I didn't pick that up.
You didn't catch that? I got to be a little more direct next time.
I thought you were cool with it there for a minute.
Well, it's a good paper. I mean, they did what they wanted to do, but the interpretation and people saying this shows what Persinger found is not true. That's wrong. It's wrong because the authors themselves only say it's partially supported or some hypotheses were not supported. You got to read to the end, guys. Not you. I mean, everybody who's reading this paper and promoting it as debunking all of Persinger's work. And the other thing, let's put our skeptical hats on with this paper. Persinger, how many papers did he publish on this? This is one paper that goes against what he said. And they also found out that they did not. No, not this one. We'll talk about the other one. Sorry, the other one. There's another one where there's some technical problems with it.
Okay. All right. We're almost at an hour. Wow, this flew by. Holy shit.
It's a great
I can't believe it's an hour.
Oh my God. So
I don't even have to pee yet. I mean,
why don't we just slide into the other? I actually didn't find that other study. I was so engrossed in trying to read through this stuff that I didn't actually get to that one.
When they're 50 pages each, it takes time. Jesus.
Yeah, I know. And then I got to look up all the words that I don't know. So, click find, click describe.
Yep. Highlight, right click, look up.
Yep. So there was a let's see. It's I'm going to butcher this name. So I don't even know how to pronounce this. P-E-H-R.
Para.
I'm not touching that one, guys. Have fun.
Oh my God. They don't even spell it right. There's supposed to be a U after the Q.
Grandquist or something?
Grandquist. Oh my God. Forget it.
Yep.
Fuck his name. So they attempted to replicate Persinger's experiments under a double-blind study, and they were not able to reproduce. I didn't get to the study. I went through some of the emails that were between Persinger and this team, going back and forth, and I think that actually turned me off to the entire thing. their entire debate, which is not a debate. I think they were having a pissing contest against each other.
Yeah.
And I think on both sides, they were. I don't know if everyone was completely honest, but I don't know because there's a lot of hearsay from reading through the email. So just to clarify to everybody that's watching, so Persinger and this team led by the guy
we'll call him Dr. G.
Yeah. Dr. G. That's great.
Backward.
The team led by Dr. G and Persinger. So apparently 2 people on that team, Dr. G and somebody else, visited Persinger and they got a tour. They got a tour of the facility and then went through an entire experiment to figure out exactly what was going on. And according to Dr. G, they replicated between that visit, the information from that visit, and several papers and a book by Persinger. I don't know. I forget the name of the book, but they used a book that had information on it. And they attempted to replicate it under what they claimed were double-blind studies, which they had argued that Persinger didn't do a double-blind study, which I don't know. I kind of agree. Yeah.
He said he didn't. The first one, he didn't.
Yeah. But they went back and forth because apparently, Dr. G's team didn't come up with the same results, and they were fighting. They were going back and forth. One saying, you said this and you said this. It was a pissing match. It really was. By the end of the letters, I mean, there were quite a few emails that I went through, and I was like, I'm tired of both of you. I'm done. Just fucking do the science, bitches. Just let it go. But I don't know. Again, I didn't read the study, the follow-up, because I was just turned off by then. And I didn't have enough time to read it. So I don't know if they did proper protocols. I don't know if they followed exactly the method. And I don't know if the method was the right one, even if they did follow it. Because as we saw, it changed. And just reading the few papers that I have here, it's a different methodology between them. So, but he was getting the same results. And that actually reminded me of the guy that created the Frank's box, Frank Sumter, because he would create a box and then create a completely different one and had the same results, and then made a completely different one from the first 2 and had the same results. So that bothered me. But again, I didn't read that study, so I can't compare. I can only tell you from what I read from the emails. So I'll pass it off, and you, Dave, go ahead, have fun.
Well, there's a couple key differences. One, Persinger's lab did all their stuff based on a DOS system. This Dr. G, his lab used Windows 95, and they claim that at the time that actually would have distorted the signal. Now with USB and sound cards, they don't have that problem. But I guess back then that was a key problem. So the signals were no longer the same as what Persinger's lab was using. So they claim that's one problem. The other problem is they only applied the fields, the signal, for 10 minutes. And Persinger has very clearly stated that 10 to 15 it starts, 20 is where it maxes out. So they didn't give the full amount of time that would be required to see the effect. So those are two technical parts of it. The other part is they claim suggestibility is to blame, but they didn't even test. They said Persinger is all due to suggestibility. In their paper, their work, they didn't even test suggestibility. So why would you accuse somebody of doing that and saying it's due to that, but you don't even evaluate suggestibility? So there's a couple problems. And like you said, I got sick of the pissing match and I gave up reading on it after a while. I'm like, he said, she said, whatever. But if you read the paper, they do state, and you read Persinger's paper, it's DOS versus Windows, 10 minutes versus 20. Why didn't you test suggestibility if you think it's such a problem?
Right.
So there's criticism all around.
That, because I do remember reading about them going back and forth about the 5 minutes versus 15, 10, or 20 minutes.
Yep.
And something about in Persinger's book that he had stated that 5 minutes was enough time. to induce something. I don't know. I think the problem there, my main problem with that was that they had their pissing contest through emails, and it was different people. It wasn't the same two people just arguing back and forth. It was this person and this person and this person, and I don't like the way they said this about me. It was ridiculous. I wish they would have just said, you know what?
Yep.
I don't think that was right. Kept their argument, like academic argument, in the journals.
Yep. I agree.
Where it was public and everyone could see it and it could be reviewed. With people that knew what they were doing could weigh in, but instead they kept it private through emails, which doesn't benefit anyone. And they ended up just stopping. They stopped talking and they wouldn't work together, which is bad. I mean, I thought it would have been nice if they could have worked together and said, all right, let's try it. Let's do this exactly how you do it. We'll fly you out. You come set up in our lab and we'll help monitor so we can all see what's going on and then try it.
Yep.
But oh well. So that's all I have to say about that. Tim,
that's
anything
all
to
I
add?
have to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that.
No, I agree. I think it's, on the side note, it's pretty good to show that people are people and people are human.
Yeah.
Researchers or not, people fall into the same traps that anybody else does. So it doesn't matter your degree.
Right.
Yeah. We're all
All right.
human.
We do have some questions. Do we want to keep go? Do you have anything else to add, or do you want to go to questions? I'm good. You guys good?
I'm good
Bring
with
on
questions.
the questions.
All right. Let's do some questions. Bob, in the conclusions to the research or any follow-up articles, was there any mention of using the God helmet to study schizophrenia, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc.? Seems there may be some connections, especially with auditory hallucinations. I didn't come across anything like that.
I came across similar, not his research, but I doing just some basic just some God helmet searches and auditory stuff in Google Scholar. I came up with treating auditory hallucinations with the use of electrical impulses. I don't think it referenced the God helmet at all, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I know what I was looking for. One of the questions I had was, if somebody is born deaf, if they've never had any type of auditory input whatsoever, could this helmet still stimulate what would be perceived as sound? So I was looking for that. And that's when I ran across there was far more studies about treatment of hallucinations in schizophrenia and dementia and manic depression, using stimulation, using electrical impulses and magnetism.
But that's a different than what Persinger was doing with
totally
like
different.
a million times more on the actual
treatment
strength of the field, and it's very detailed and pinpoint. So I didn't see anything like that for schizophrenia, dementia, or Alzheimer's relating to the God helmet and those low-level complex magnetic fields applied to the scalp.
The only thing I came across was mention of epilepsy.
Yeah.
And that was the earlier.
There was some stuff on depression. I think he did some work on using the helmet to see if they could alleviate depression, but I don't remember exactly what they found.
Chewy's here.
My cat's been hitting me up here
we
recently.
Got some fireworks going off, and it's freaking.
Yep.
It's all right, girl. All right. So next up, we got Kathy. So the whole helmet thing was a sensory thing, research thing.
Yeah. Later on, it was.
Yes.
It wasn't what I think she thought it was at the beginning.
Right.
I think she put that in the comments.
And a follow up. Why did they call it the God helmet? I think that was the media
that
hooked onto that.
Because people had some experiences that they said that they had the experience of a deity or God or Allah or whatever you believe in and think it was.
Right. And I mean that's typical. That's so typical, like you have any kind of announcement that, hey, we have a helmet that induces a presence, and some people feel like a god or an angel or something like that. As soon as you say that, forget it. That's the headline.
Yeah, want to take a moment just for like a PSA. If you look at a newspaper clipping or a forward from a link in some type of media that claims something that research found, scroll through that and look for the actual link to the actual paper.
Yeah.
If they don't even have that, then question that bullshit that's above it. Look for that link. If they don't, if an article or a newspaper or media outlet makes a claim from research and don't even give you the link to look at it for yourself,
Yeah.
I highly doubt that whatever they said before that or in that article is true. Might be true, but if you're not going to let me see for myself, then you're probably full of shit.
Yeah. I do the same thing. When I see a headline, a clickbait headline, but it has something to do with something I'm interested in, yeah, I click on it and then I go right to the link to the original paper because I want to see that instead. Because 9.99 times out of 10, the headline does not accurately reflect the paper.
Yep.
All right. Next question here. Dave, how much to rent your God helmet? Back when the price jumped from $285, I decided to quit, but still interested. It would fold right into Gansfeld experiments.
Once I get it up and running again, which I think I need to update the software, and I got one adapter that's bad. I'm more than happy to lend it to somebody if they want to play around with it. Just make sure you send it back.
But not before Gettysburg.
No, I want to fry these two guys' brain. Before
Yeah. There's not a whole lot
amplifiers, a couple transformers and amplifiers on there to step it up a bit.
Yep.
I think we should test it on alcohol and marijuana.
Sounds
I
good
think
to
it
me.
says
It's for science. It's for science. That's it.
I thought I was reading this because I was reading the website that you sent me on this, and I thought it mentioned something about not doing it with any drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, they're even
Well, what
that.
do they know?
That commercial helmet, they actually recommend that you make sure nobody has any medical problems. They have a whole list of things. Not that they really think anything would happen, but just in case. I mean, people have adverse effects that are not due to treatments, but they can think they are. So, yeah, there is that. You definitely want to make sure people are okay and sign a waiver.
So I guess I'll make sure I'm sober the weekend we're together.
Perfect.
Because
So that'll be what, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then
get
that's
me early
for our window. Okay.
Get me early.
And when he has to drive home.
We can put in a camera and let us get into a dark room by ourselves, and
we should have fun. And that's going to be. I know as soon as you pull that out, everyone at the conference is going to be like, "Oh,
well, yeah," and we'll get it up and running. But I think you just want to be careful of who you do that with and make sure they understand. I mean, not that anything would probably happen, but again, you want them to be aware of potential adverse events.
Well, I don't care about anyone else, just us.
That's great.
Just we get to play with it. No one else.
I mean, if you guys get a bad headache, I'm just going to laugh. If somebody else is, I'm probably going to feel bad.
I'll just drink it away.
Yep.
Not a problem. All right. Next question. Last question we got. So were those atheists always atheists, or did they grow up in religion? What I'm suggesting here, could the atheists who felt a presence have been influenced by their past experience with religion?
Don't know. I don't know that they noted that. They just said atheists. So all we know is at the time they claimed to be atheists.
Yeah. All right. That's it for questions. Tim, did you find the Michael Shermer thing?
I found a few, but the conversation got really good. I jumped back to it. There is a Michael Shermer on, looks like his website. September of 1999, he puts a video so that you can see his experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see that. All right. So if we don't have anything else to add to this one, we might swing back around to this at a later time.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
I don't want to push it off in another direction, but I also had this question of why I'm like, I guess I understand why, but on a more profound level, like what was the ghost hunting attraction to this? Because I also went off and I started watching videos of ghost hunters, using it on their YouTube channels in conjunction with the Gansfield experiment as well. So they mix both of them together. And I didn't understand why, because if they looked at the original hypothesis and the findings, they would understand, like, if you're in this haunted location using this God helmet, and you say, well, this is great, I had far more connections with what I believed were ghosts, then you are using the very thing that explains why you are not experiencing ghosts in the first place.
I think,
It's
Tim, you
because-
answered your own question.
I
If they
know,
would
but-
have read the entire study and understood it.
Yeah, it was just, it's amazing. Like, this took off with ghost hunters. Like, I'm like, I kind of feel bad. Like, one of the first ones I watched, they were like, this is great. God helmet's great because it helps increase the brain's activity so that we can reach into, like, the spiritual realm and communicate.
That's it right there. And we touched on it before the show.
Yeah.
That ghost hunters, as a stereotype, they love to cherry pick information.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And like some of the stuff, like, again, in 1986, I saw a study. I read through one of the studies, and it said, this was from Persinger, who mentions paranormal experiences and a sense of self during the experiment. And he clarifies the paranormal experience as mystical with religious overtones. And then in later ones, he keeps mentioning the sense of a presence. That's a common theme throughout most of his papers. And then other paranormal aspects. So I can definitely see, like, your stereotypical ghost hunter doing a search and saying, well, they already heard about the God helmet, so let's look it up. Finding, instead of one of the academic papers, they find a news article.
Yes.
And they read about it, and it says about paranormal stuff and the mention of ghosts and demons and shadows. And immediately it clicks. And I can totally get this from back in my ghost hunter days of, oh, that'll help me see ghosts.
That was the first video, was like this.
Yeah.
This enhances our brain activity so that we can reach further into the spiritual realm and connect with the dead and speak to the dead.
Wrong.
And I'm like, you didn't read the paper, did you?
Nope.
But what would be cool to try, though, is have the isolation, have those conditions, and do that, but do it in a haunted location and then in a non-haunted location, and see if you get anything different. And don't tell them if it's haunted or not. I mean, that's blinding. But it would be, I mean, if you want to test that hypothesis that it might make you more aware or more able to have experiences, then there's an easy way to test that. And I think that'd actually be a fun, interesting test to do.
Yeah.
I think my thought is you probably wouldn't see a difference.
Especially
if you're blindfolded and you don't know if it's haunted or not. I'm just going to hypothesize that you wouldn't see a difference.
We really need to win the lottery so we can just go buy really cool, expensive shit and do experiments all over the place. That would be...
Yeah, we'll board the Learjet, go to England for a weekend. We're going to test this. We'll be back.
We'll be back.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Alas, I am not that rich, so
no
shit.
But I think that definitely has an impact. Because I've seen it. There's a guy that I know. He's a ghost hunter. He does the rounds on conferences and stuff. And years ago, we went to the Shanley Hotel up in Nyack, up in Mitch Silverstein's area. We went up there, and he had an improvised, a do-it-yourself version of this. And basically, he took magnets out of a set of headphones, and he just strapped them to your head.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, let me try it. And I sat down in one of the rooms, and he put it on my head. But, I mean, this was a complete amateur setup. No idea what he was doing.
Complex fields and varying.
It was about as complex as my ass. It was not. It was just two magnets, one on either side.
I wish there was a picture of that. I was fucking...
I do have a picture of it. I do. I don't have. I'll have to find it. I'll send it to you guys.
New T-shirt idea. That's about as complex as my ass.
But geez, like
that is good. That is good, Dave.
Bringing it up, like this is not what the work is. This is not what the experiment was. Like, oh, well, I got the classic it's good enough. It's close enough. And that, makes me cringe. Like, no, it's not. It's not. No, you're just doing shit work. And if something happens, if somebody says something happens, you're going to jump on that. And that's the stereotypical response.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. So, all right. So are we good? I think we're all good. Wait, is there a picture of your ass or magnet? Both.
Both.
Definitely has. But I have pictures of magnets on my ass. Anyway, keep that visual with you tonight, boys. So let's go with closing statements. We'll wrap this up for tonight. Dave, you go first.
Good topic.
Actually,
Great topic.
You know what? We should make Dave go last because he might get angry.
Okay, Tim, go.
Tim, you go.
Go ahead. Tim, piss me off.
Okay. This was a great topic. I cussed Kenny in a few posts that he made me read so many fucking papers for this. Like, I read more papers for this show than I have in any other topic. And the interesting thing about that was the concept of this topic. I don't think the concept, not the research or the studying, but the concept is pretty straightforward and simple. Can you manipulate your brain with magnetic fields? And just testing it. And I don't think that he set out to do anything finding God. I don't think he set out to look at why people are religious. I just think he set out for a very interesting, by itself, it's very interesting. How does your brain perceive self? That's a great question. Mm-hmm. How does it do that? That's a really fascinating question. I think it was kind of bastardized once it kind of got out by the media and other people that wanted to cherry pick, like Kenny was saying. But that topic by itself is very interesting. It spurned probably, I have a list. It spurned many different rabbit holes for me. Thanks, Kenny Biddle. I wanted to know about sensory deprivation, parts of the brains. Like, I wanted to learn more about what parts of the brains do when they're under stimulation, fear in the brain, starvation and dehydration, what those effects are on parts of the brain, especially over time, and the percentage of dehydration and starvation. Sensory overload for each sensation. Like, if you have an overload of an overwhelming smell for very long, what does that do for the rest of your senses, and how does your brain handle it? So, yeah, so that's, thanks. I don't know, probably have had too much coffee doing this, but the whole idea, I think, is a good idea. I think his first original question was absolutely wonderful, especially from a psychology background. How does the brain sense self? I mean, that's a pretty 101 question that you're going to study if you go to any regular psych classes. I think it's really good. I just think that the whole idea got picked up and taken way out of context for ghost hunters and the like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an excellent idea to explore, and I wish there was more work into this, because just the idea, thinking about the how your brain produces electricity and how it communicates, just from that, and in introducing magnetic fields to see if you manipulate it, and especially after like I knew about electrical manipulation, and Tim, you sent that link that went through the different parts of the brain that produce different effects. Excuse me. And it's amazing. I knew about that. I didn't see the breakdown. So, because the link you sent was a breakdown of each area of the brain, and it's fascinating. Yeah. And to think like, oh, can we do this with just magnetic fields and disrupt it, or see what happens? Like, it's really fascinating. So, getting into this is something, admittedly, I knew little about. I knew the gist of it. I didn't know everything about it. And getting into it, I mean, as soon as I started, I was up at like 7 a.m. this morning. I was just up and I started looking into it. And I remember looking at the clock going, there's not enough time. Wow. I'm going to just do my best and get through as many as I can. But I think on both sides, there was a lot of work by Persinger and his, I would say, just crew. There's a lot of work by them, and I know that he does reference his work a lot in his studies, which I know people do. I've done it. I've referenced my own articles. I don't see anything wrong with that. maybe if you do it too much, but I don't know what too much is. So I'm not even going to go any further with that. I think there should be more work, or I would like to see more work by other independent teams to replicate exactly what he does or what he did. Because sadly, he's not with us anymore. It would be really good to see that, and at least more attempts go through it. I would love to see that, and I would love to participate in that. And then right before I pass it off to Dave, I just want to say that the Dr. G team was right, and they totally obliterated everything Persinger did. So there you go. Dave,
Go ahead, Dave.
We're just going to ignore that and move on. It's not even worthy of a comment.
Dr. G. Dr. G.
Fuck you. What?
There we go.
No, I agree with what you both said. Good points across the board. Really don't have too much more to add. The last thing I'll just put in there is they still don't know what the exact mechanism would be for these fields, these low-level fields, even though they're complex, applied externally to the brain through the skull, really, how they could potentially work. There's some hypotheses on them, but you can poke holes with a lot of that stuff. So how that actually works is a big problem. However, and I'm trying to see, there was a recent paper that they talk about transduction of geomagnetic field as evidenced by alpha band activity in the human brain. This came out, I think, 2019. And what they found is levels equivalent to the Earth's magnetic field, where they just rotate them. They did actually establish there's a response in the brain. So what that mechanism is, they talk about it. Could it be cell membranes? Could it be ion transport? Could it be some sort of resonance you're creating? Or do you actually have ferromagnetic material in your body, which they think we do, that could be picking up these signals? So it's interesting how a lot of years past what both labs and Persinger did and others. And they're trying to figure out, well, how could it actually work if it did work? But now there's new data that says, well, maybe it does work. So I agree. I think taking that into consideration, it's definitely worth looking into. I think the ghost hunting group and paranormal investigators, Tim, you're spot on with what you said about that. There's actually people that have taken these experience-inducing fields that Persinger used in the lab, and they looked for them in haunted locations. Dr. Jason Braithwaite was one of the bigger ones that published research on this, neuroscientist, and he did find them in locations where people specifically had experiences. The problem is he only found them in about 5% of the locations where people said they had experiences. So there's a lot of unknowns. There's maybe something to it, but it like anything else in science, it's going to take a lot more research, and yeah, it'd be fun to get involved with it. So that's it.
Cool. All right, Tim, you got anything coming up?
No.
Oh, Jesus.
I will
Dave,
be
you got
at the
anything coming up?
Gettysburg Battlefield Bash. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to it so much.
You do.
Nice. I will be there as well. And besides that, right now, just this awesome show on Saturday nights I do with Tim and Kenny.
Sweet. All right. So then me, I do this show Friday night, 8:00, called the Skeptical Help Bar. Pretty much like this one, except these guys are in the chat room harassing me when they can.
Yep.
But basically it's the same kind of show. And then I do this awesome show with these two guys on Saturday. And then what's coming up? I'll be at Fort Mifflin in July 8th. I'm going to be there with one of the guys that usually hangs out, John with NH. His team is coming up from North Carolina, and
Cool.
I'm going to tag along with them to Fort Mifflin and do overnight investigation. So we'll see what happens there. July 16th is Skeptical, which is a online conference by the California Skeptics, and I'll be speaking about being a ghost hunter and then going to a skeptical activist. July 23rd is Para-Unity Conference in Woodbridge, New Jersey. I'll be out there with my booth and just causing trouble because I know a lot of ghost hunting teams are there. Jason Halls will be there. I'll be harassing him. I'll be throwing stuff at him. a lot.
Good.
The Ghost Brothers will be there. I like that.
Awesome.
They're fun.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
so much fun.
I think I think that their show was what it should be about.
The first season.
The first season.
Yes.
It was
Fun.
And then
was
they went to
fun.
a different network and they got all like regular ghost hunting team. And then I was disappointed. August 19th to 21st is the Gettysburg Battlefield Batch, which is what all three of us will be at. We'll be hanging out. And oh, cool. Dr. Jim. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good to know.
I hope he comes. I hope everybody that listens is able to come by. I'd like to see Dr. Jim again. He was great.
That would be fun. I mean, it's a good event too. I think it's only $20 for the weekend to get in, which is like when you're talking paranormal conferences, that's cheap. That's cheap. $20 for a weekend. And they're going to have bands, singers, food trucks. There's entertainment. There's a dunk tank, which I'm told I have to be in again. So you can come out and dunk a skeptic. And there's vendors and all kinds of people harassing. You'll get to see us. They're probably causing trouble because, that's what we do. And then the last thing I have is October 20th, 23rd is SciCon out in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a science conference, and I get to speak to a whole bunch of people, and that's going to be fun. So there you go. All right, guys. Thanks for a great show. You guys did awesome. This was a fun topic.
It's a great topic.
Yeah.
Yep, awesome.
All right. So we will see everyone next week. Who's up? Dave? Tim? Dave. Dave's up.
I'm up.
Got your
All
topic
right.
yet? Got your topic? I was 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. That's the record. You ain't going to beat that.
Yeah, I'll go for the shortest record, maybe 5 minutes before the show.
All right, guys. We will see you next week. Take it easy.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take
Bye.
care.
Sound.